Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. If you're listening on the podcast, look, all these all these tech vendors are in the show notes. They're the sponsors, but they're also the ones I use. And this podcast is going to be, I think, a good one because I talked about starting a site, getting study, all this stuff, but this is going to be about managing a growing site, which you can be a brand new site that's growing. You could be a site that's been around for 2 decades or more that's growing. And I don't think we cover this enough in the
Mm-mm.
industry. And I have a senior CRA on, but also she's just recently been a remote site monitor for a major CRO. So she's going to give us her insights because she was working directly with sites on what they can do better just from her experiences as far as like what site owners or site directors can do better as far as growing their sites. But look, here's the sponsors, which also are tech companies that help you grow, which I use them all. First one's in Nato, it's on my shirt. It's BizDev for sites, but it's free, unlocking access to trials in the community. Now, this is not yet for brand new sites. Like they actually vet you. It's all free. They send you study leads, but they vet you. So you have to like prove that you have experience in these therapeutic areas. But once you do, which is the state that I'm in right now with Yuma Clinical Trail, barely, but I'm there, you get like free study opportunities. It's amazing. Go check out the link underneath this video in the show notes. The next one's Versatrial. It helps keep your site organized with all these links. Ashley, one of my new studies, we haven't even started. We have like 13 portals. 13.
Oh my god.
I don't know any of these passwords. I don't
Yeah.
even know which one does what. But because of Versatrial, I don't have to think. It's just okay. I go on there. Okay, I need EDC. I can't remember who's the EDC.
Mhm.
Here it is, and then I just click, and I'm signed in, and boom. So I love Versatrial. Plus, they do a feasibility thing, which is really cool for sites. It makes your feasibilities easier because it remembers what
Mhm.
you put. Versatrial, check it out. Viva Site Vault, amazing. If you want a free ereg, like if you're a site, 80% of sites have not switched to digital anything, eSource or eReg. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Here's a free way to do it. Viva Site Vault, free eReg. So far, these three that I mentioned are all free. The last one, Creo, it's not free, but I think it's worth it because they have eSource, eReg, CTMS, financials, reporting, patient recruitment. Plus, the founder Ray is always rolling out new stuff. They have a medical records thing, which actually, when I talk to you about this medical records thing,
My
like,
background.
well, do you know that? I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm just going to say it anyways. When you're a site and you have a patient coming in from outside of your clinic, so you don't have their
Mhm.
medical history, the
Yes.
the process now is like, let's get them to sign this authorization to release
Yes.
records. Let's
Mhm.
fax it to their doctor and let's
Mhm.
wait for them. And usually you have to do 3 documented fax attempts and phone
Mhm.
calls. Well, Creo is gonna launch this thing. It's gonna be free for the sites. Um, this database where 90% of patients in the US are already in it. So as
Wow.
long as you get the authorization uploaded, their medical records will be in your in the subject
Wow.
folder. Like
That's pretty major.
game changing. Wait till they
Yeah.
start doing recruitment. Ray, if I said too much, I'm sorry, man. But Creo is the way to go.
That's a major. I was in the medical industry for 13 years, and I actually very much detested that process. I thought it was super inefficient, especially
Yeah.
when you had new patients coming in and they're, taking time from their day and stuff. So that's amazing.
Well, we're at the point where like these doctors just won't. They're especially in like these underserved communities. Like their MA, has to get this fax and then respond to it. Like they just don't do
Mhm.
it. So what
Mhm.
we've started doing for patients outside our clinic is giving them an intake form and they self-report what they're taking. Or we ask them to bring all their medications with them to their screening
Yeah.
visit. But it's not as accurate. Like they
For
forget
sure.
or they don't know like certain things or maybe they don't want to put certain things. So you're not getting like the full
Viewpoint. Yeah.
And this is a good segue into our conversation. So one of the I believe that patient leads so I think recruitment is gonna get a little bit easier with technology. Patient leads are eventually gonna be passive for sites, as crazy as that sounds.
No, I mean, I can see that though. It makes sense for sure.
I think in a decade, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that, like, by 2033, I think sites will have no problem getting patient leads for their studies, but that doesn't mean those are all screenings, like, or
Yeah.
randomizations. So
Yeah.
someone's gonna have to vet through those leads. Sites are gonna all have to have call centers or a dedicated person just calling everyone and doing a really good job of pre-screening, unless tech can do that, but tech won't do the persuasion part.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I was about to say for 2030, there's a lot of expected growth and expansion in tech, especially within healthcare and pharmaceuticals. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case and that does happen by, I'd say 2030. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's a perfectly good example to go and state that, for those of you that are doing patient recruitment, or that are in the area of maybe customer service and in healthcare, this is probably something that you can really consider to start tailoring yourself to, because this is definitely going to be needed for sure.
Yeah, if you're smart, like, just approach sites now and say, "Hey, you know what? I'll learn, like, the studies you want me to learn from the pre-screening perspective, and I'll pre-screen patients for you." Like, that's a skill that, uh, is gonna be increasingly important.
Hmm.
Managing a site, like my site, Yuma Clinical Trials, and then, by the way, for those of you guys watching, listening, you're gonna recognize this guest. If you don't, then I don't know what's wrong with you, where you've been. It's actually Margot. Her link is underneath the video and in the show notes. I've known her for, like I've known you right before COVID. That's
Right
when I
before
met you.
COVID,
Right
literally
before
January right before March, when it happened.
it w mm, no, it was February, I remember. It was
The
like
February?
the cold February 2020, I came out to Austin. It was one of the coldest weeks ever in Austin. I went there, or at least for that year. I
Yeah,
went there for me, it was cold from California. I
yeah,
went there, and there was rumor because it was in China already. And I remember the Uber
yeah.
driver driving me back to the airport, and he's like, "Man, good thing you can get on this flight. I hear rumors." And
Hmm.
I was like, "Nah, don't worry about it."
Well, you remember we
Yeah,
talked about it because I was at the time I was in public health and I was in infectious disease public health. So we spoke about that at I think when we went out that time. We talked a little bit about it because it was getting pretty crazy. I think, but yeah, it's a
it's
long time ago, like
crazy.
4 years.
It changed the industry, um, for the better, I think, but
Yeah,
at least research.
yeah.
But Ashley, I've known her for a while, and in that time, she became a CRA. Now she's a senior CRA. She became a consultant. She's been helping us with our CRA and CRC academies, people getting them like preparing them for job interviews and CV and resume preps, which she still does. Um, but on this interview, so go connect with her. But in this interview, we're going to focus on her recent time as a remote site monitor,
Mhm.
because for this topic of managing growing sites, you probably have interesting insights that I overlook as a site director. So, like, what are
Yeah.
some of you had these weekly calls you had to make with your sites.
Mhm.
What were like some of the main pain points that you see that sites could improve?
For sure. So I think ultimately it obviously the staff, right? I think PIs run heavily on the coordinator. So when I talk about growth and potential efficiency, I always reference the coordinator. Partially also what I speak about in your CRC Academy to the CRC students, is that if using technology is definitely one thing benefiting. This is why I like what you were saying with these companies that you just mentioned, especially like versatile. I love that they organize things because I think making things easily able to access without confusion or anything like that is a huge one. But ultimately it comes down to the coordinator, how well they are organized, not just in general, but for each study specifically, right? Because you'll have one study that's probably a little bit more relaxed that you have more often, and then you'll have one study that's pretty intense and difficult, but it's only every so often that you'll get a subject, or however often you have to screen. And so what I've found is that sometimes coordinators, because they're more common studies, are more relaxed. They tend to be relax on their end, on the end side, but whenever it comes to the difficult studies, they start to fall behind and have some issues and kind of say, well, I don't know what I'm doing, or this or that, or, oh, you know what, I'll do this again next time. It's kind of having such organization up in place to really be more efficient. So some of the things that I teach as a consultant for these coordinators, is some of the things that I would recommend are being very particular in how you set up and organize your calendar, and making sure that your team, whether it's your PI and or data manager or CTA, that everybody's up to par and understands the, whether it's color coding or organization off of that end. Because should something happen and you be out of town or be sick or something like that, your team already has placement and understanding of how you organize, so that somebody can easily jump in and help assist, right? This
From
helps with any.
your
Mhm.
from your experiences though as a RSM, remote
Yeah,
site monitor,
yeah.
how many sites would you say, like just guessing percentage, were organized to the level you would like?
So I oversaw 32 sites, both overseeing Canada and the US, and I can honestly say maybe four,
4 out of
maybe
32,
four.
so what is that?
Yeah,
My math
so
sucks.
yeah, my
16%?
math sucks.
16%.
Probably, yeah, it was extremely low. I felt like it was extremely low that were actually organized, and that they really relied very heavily on my site management call, issue that I gave them via email. So if you don't know what that is when a monitor calls you weekly or biweekly or monthly, they go over all the issues and reference back to the IMV that happened with the previous on-site CRA, and ensure that you're up to date about what's going on. So usually the CRAs or CRCs would be like, "Oh, well, I didn't receive it. Can you send it to me? I really don't know what's going on." Which, hey, it's fine. That's the whole point of that SMC. But naturally, if you're organized, if you're being on point with your information, because even CRAs make mistakes, right? It's a known fact that like everybody down the line can make a mistake, and so you don't want to assume and rely 100% on your CRA, because ultimately that's CRO level. You are the CRC that is overseeing everybody at the site level. So if you run the risk of somebody else potentially not or doing their job right, something happens, it falls back on you at the site level, which you have the highest role, right? So
What were like did you have any, could you tell during your calls the experience
yes,
level of the coordinators?
yes, immediately, immediately, yeah. It's pretty much, if I asked for something, where are we at with this? You know what? I don't know. Let me figure that out and get back to you. A lot of the coordinators that just didn't have the information on hand would say, give me a quick minute. Let me run through my documentation right here, and I'll get that answered for you. But for the ones that would be very much like, oh, you know what? Can I give you an email back? Can I give you a call back? That let me know that they either did not follow through, or if they did, they didn't follow up to see what the update was on that issue. So they're not entirely on top of that issue itself, which is not a bad thing. Because again, if your site is busy, and you're communicating with your CRA, they're going to know that you have multiple studies. They're going
Yeah.
to actually be understanding that, hey, you're not going to immediately know every answer right away.
But
But
how do you differentiate? I guess what I'm trying to get at, because for
yeah,
sites trying to manage their growing site like me,
mm.
how do you differentiate? Like, when do you escalate it? And do you escalate it to the site director or PI?
Oh,
Or
when
like, how do you
there's an issue.
differentiate between this is just a busy coordinator
Yeah,
versus this is a coordinator that's just not getting things done and I don't have confidence in them?
for sure. So what we do, or what I would do, sorry, what I would do as a CRA is, if I sent an email, let's say 1 month, right, and we had the follow up SMC and they didn't give me any response, the next SMC the following month I would follow back up. If I got the same response, I would resend the email. This time I would attach the PI, and I would also attach the CTM of the study, the clinical trial manager, and make sure that that email has a chain from the previous times I had already communicated and stated,
Ah.
as per today's call, you did confirm that you did not, XYZ.
Those
I followed
coordinators
up.
gonna hate you.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, when you look at it on the end of efficiency, that coordinator, if they take the lesson well, because it is a learning lesson, right? That's something that's going to make them more efficient and potentially that much more, valuable, right? Because they're learning on the end of the CRA and how to be more, I guess, more accurate follow through, right? So that's what I do. And if there's no response there at that point, I do escalate to the CTM. The CTM more than likely will reach out to the PI or send another separate email directed to the PI with the CRC included in the email, but not directed to the CRC.
Wait,
So
wait.
letting the
Uh, but yeah,
yeah,
but before that, so when you send the email to the
mhm,
CRC and the PI and the
yeah,
CTM,
yeah,
I'm just curious, how often does the PI reply?
not often. Yeah, not
So
often.
nothing will actually get changed. That's the thing is like
No, yeah,
there's a site director there at the site
mhm,
that you may
mhm,
not know
yeah,
or you may not have the contact. That's probably the one responsible for this. Like that'd be me at my site. Like my
yeah,
PI also probably wouldn't reply, or if he did, he would just forward it to me,
mhm,
the site director.
mhm,
And that's typical, I think. But that's why I wanted to ask you that, and you
yeah.
basically confirmed this.
Yeah, so typically, if there is a site director, we will be notified, or like if, like for example, when I was on a remote site monitor, depending on the communication, because usually, right, the traveling CRA is the one that creates those relationships,
Mm.
and they confirm whether the site director is okay with actually being included on these emails, which they should.
They need
But
to be.
yeah, exactly. But if the PI isn't aware that the site director is saying, I don't want to be on those emails, this is solely responsible of the coordinator. Well, then, yeah, you're going to have issues like that where there's escalations, and only it's going to be added just to the coordinator and to the PI. The site director is going to be nowhere included on these emails and documentations because that wasn't
Well,
communicated.
that's a bad site director then. Like
Mhm.
to me, the site director is supposed to be in charge of this stuff, like to make the
Mhm.
PI's life easy. That's my
Yes.
job as a site owner, site director. My I don't want any of my PIs getting upset. And the more
Mhm.
emails they get like this, like people are not doing their jobs, the
Mhm.
worse it looks on me.
Yeah.
As and the higher the risk that this PI says, you know what, Dan, I don't want to do this anymore. You guys
Mhm.
blowing up my inbox with all these angry monitors.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no, this is
site
it's
directors need to take care of it. This is videos for them.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, but this is definitely something that does happen, that can happen. So, it's I guess you'd say as a PI, you want to ensure that your site director, especially if you're starting off, that they're taking full accountability of what the coordinators are doing and or how they're going about communicating with the CROs with the studies in particular.
How often did you catch from the 32 sites you had, right?
Mhm.
Um, how often did you catch like a major issues?
Uh Well, I was phase 3, and to be quite honest, towards the end, we're already, like, in the closeout portion, so, um, when you're in closeout, you're gonna catch a lot of stuff, right? Because it's already at
Yeah,
that point where
yeah.
you're breaking down a bunch of things,
But
but
like major versus like regular stuff, because everyone
um,
has regular stuff like
yeah, I
queries
would say
unanswered, all this stuff, but like
major,
major.
I would say maybe just 2 sites, but I can attest that to very amazing principal CRAs that I worked with that were traveling to the sites. I was very fortunate to learn from them. But yeah, they were, I would say, an all-star team, which obviously doesn't happen all the time. But because of that, there really wasn't any major issues that I caught before they did,
So
right?
they were able to clean it up. But can you
Yes,
share
there
like
were.
what those
Mhm.
things were without breaking like the blind?
Yeah. So I would say one of the biggest issues that this probably happens at all sites is just when you are going through constant turnover, especially of CRC turnover. Like that right there was one of the major issues because if you had a coordinator coming in that wasn't either experienced, and I won't say that because even unexperienced coordinators, as long as they're trained well, like they should be fine, right? So I would say that a coordinator coming in that wasn't accurately trained, that was overwhelmed within the 3 to 5 month period, and then kind of put their hands up and left, and then another coordinator comes in, and you ultimately end up having a 3, 4, 6, maybe even 8 month break period where you're just trying to catch up and let them catch up. By the time you know it, it's already almost a year period where now they're like, okay, well, what do I How am I supposed to fix all these things, right? And so it's a domino effect. So whenever you do hire individuals, I'm not going to say only hire people with experience. No, give other people opportunities that can do it, that come with good transitionable skills. But just ensure that you're not just throwing them in there. That you're giving them adequate training. You're giving them adequate oversight, and that at least you're giving them at least 2 or 3 months where you're with them in the calls with the CRAs and
Mm.
RSMs, just to ensure that communication is clear, thorough, and that there's good follow through, right?
See, that's
Um,
another like aspect of needing a manager or a site director. Like
yeah.
from let's go back to these 32 sites.
Mhm.
How many had like just approximate active site managers or directors that would
That I
get
was
involved?
aware of, that I
Yeah.
was aware of, maybe 5% that I was aware of.
See,
I
that's
don't know,
really
but
low. That's
yeah,
really low.
but that was a remote type monitor end. That's not to state that if the traveling CRA did communicate, because that's not something I would communicate with them specifically, unless we had to escalate stuff, which there wasn't a whole lot of escalation happening. But again, it as far as the remote type monitor aspect, the only communication I was really having was with the coordinators and the PIs.
Yeah. So that okay, 5% that you're aware of, they probably had more. So let's say half of them. But
Yeah.
even half is too little. Like I really think every site needs one.
Hmm.
Uh we're still small enough, Yuma clinical trial. We have maybe 8 studies right now where I could be CC'd on all I want to be CC'd on all these things. I actually have
Hmm.
access to all the platforms.
Hmm.
And if my coordinators are dropping the ball, I wanna know right away. Not to blame them, but maybe they're overworked or maybe they're like haven't been trained on that. So that's
Hmm.
like my job to make sure that they're able to handle their work and they're
Yeah.
competent to handle their work. And a lot of the time, like the site director job is keep everyone happy. It sounds
Hmm.
really easy, but it's actually
Yeah, very
impossible.
difficult.
It's
Hmm.
impossible. Keep patients happy, keep your coordinators happy, keep your PIs happy, keep your monitors happy, sponsors, and then all your vendors in the
Hmm.
community. It's impossible and it's a never ending job too.
Yeah, I will say that there's an example prior to me being a remote time monitor, when I worked at a hybrid clinic. I had the experience where the coordinator had dual responsibilities. So because it was a hybrid clinic, you had the coordinator and then you had the medical office monitor who was really just on the medical end, but they kind of did a stand-in as a position of a site director, even though they never touched the research part. I don't know if this was for just documentation issues or what. This is obviously way, 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 way back, but I do remember a situation where there was an issue that came up, and ultimately, it was the site director just didn't want that extra work and was pretty much putting it back on the coordinator and putting the pressure on the coordinator. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking like, okay, well, if this is your job and if the coordinator is having issues, you hearing the issue and then retransitioning it back to the initial point of problem, there's no efficiency there, right? And so I think also setting clear lines, like if this is if a PI is listening, and you have a site director that you're having issues with, or this or that, making sure that when you onboard them, making covering all aspects that what can happen, how that scenario would play through. So if you have a coordinator and you don't have a backup coordinator and the coordinator is having issues, you as a site director have to stand in, right?
You
X,
have
Y, Z.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
do.
I
I
and I
mean,
think
I wouldn't be
people
as
don't
good
do
as any of our coordinators because I don't do day to day, but I have access to the platform. Thanks to Versatrial, I could even log in
that. Mhm.
and get in right away. But yes, somebody's got to pick up that slack. But this is a thankless job as a site director. And if you're a site owner, I think it's worth your while. And even site director, not site owners, they usually have incentives. But keeping like, let's say, keeping your monitor happy, meaning you're entering data quickly, you don't have that many action item, or you get your action items done fast, right?
Mhm.
That's keeping your monitors happy. But that's giving your coordinators more work, so
Mhm.
their happiness can't be increasing at the same time that your monitor's happiness is increasing. not to mention the whole financial aspect of like keep your PIs or the owners happy by
Mhm.
randomizing more. That means coordinators have to do more work. So there's like a theme here of like, okay, if I want to keep the key stakeholders happy, it's at the expense of coordinator burnout.
Mhm.
So as a site director, I need to pay attention to this. Like,
Yeah.
do I
I
need
think
to bring on assistants? Do I need to get in and do EDC? Like what how do we keep everyone happy? It's
yeah.
almost
I think
impossible.
I think a good site director would, one, obviously come on board and then assess the current scenario and situation of what's happening, not just, okay, what studies am I doing? How many staff do I have, and who's efficient, who's not efficient, all those kinds of things, but being aware of who's actually close or in burnout and understanding why they're in burnout, right? And ultimately seeing, because sometimes, for example, like on the CRO end, right? Uh, Monitors can obviously can sometimes actually be over burdening. Yeah, they can.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes they can in the in the sense of, either they're new or they're getting ridden on really hard by their management. So they're expecting unrealistic, things here and there. So I think after, being fully aware of these things, sitting down with your coordinator and breaking down each thing one by one and understanding why it could be an issue of they need more training or they need a little more assistance, or it's just an issue of the CRO is asking for too much or whatever. Coming back and kind of creating some guidelines or like metrics about, how far this can go, how far this can go, and at what point do you need to add somebody in, right? So, how many more studies will you get at to where you're already at max capacity and you need to speak to the PI about expansion, right? Like, I think
But
having those
that's the
kinds.
problem because a lot of these site owners and management of the
Mhm.
sites, they are looking to maximize profits.
Yeah.
So it's another thing. We just talked
Mhm.
about action items. Okay.
Mhm.
That's if you do that efficiently, that's stress on the coordinators. All right. That's one. If you randomize and screen to keep the sponsors happy at a rate that keeps the sponsors happy,
Mhm.
that's another stressor on the coordinator. All
Mhm.
right. That's two. Now you've got more workload for the CRC, like more studies.
Mhm.
Because of companies like Inato, it's actually easier to get more studies now once you have experience. Well, rather than hiring more staff, let's just give like a little raise to the coordinators, but keep some of the profits. So a lot of these site owners, I'm not going to tell them how to run their business because it's their business, but
Mhm.
I think it's actually cost you more to overburden your coordinators than
Yeah.
to hire new staff, support staff. Like I'm
Mhm.
hiring a new person. We don't need a fourth person, but we're bringing one on to do data entry initially.
Mhm.
And it makes sense for me because the three coordinators I do have, they all like a flex schedule, and one of them's in school, nursing school. So I kind of have to like kind of replace her with this new person, but this new person can also do data entry. It costs me more in the short term, but I think in the long run actually saves me money doing
Yeah.
this.
100%, instead of waiting for somebody to fall through and then
Yes.
you having to run the risk of any errors or issues being missed during the overload time, right?
Yes.
And this is, people aren't, it's, I think that's a good example as to those who are maybe new in research and then more on the business side, as opposed to understand the workings of research and what's more efficient and how that efficiency plays to the success over time. um yeah, so I mean, comes down to the owners, how they process through. If the owner's also the PI, understanding the full workings, not just, yes, you're a doctor, yes, you have your site, it's great, but do you understand the backdrop of that? Do you understand what your director needs to do?
Yeah.
And, are they capable of actually doing that with, I can say, empathy towards coordinators, because coordinators do so much. They really, really do so much. And this is why, for me personally, I'm very huge on, if you're having burnout, if there's having issues, bring somebody on that doesn't have any research background, you can technically pay them slightly lower because they're just getting their feet wet. They're going to appreciate the opportunity to get the exposure. They're going to get that exposure. They're going to help your team. You can start them off slow, bring them on. They're going to become an extreme asset to your site. And if you started them slow and bits by bits, I think that helps a site. But I feel like most companies are just focused on, okay, well, I need somebody to come in and just kind of take charge after the 3-month period, and I don't want to worry about anything, so I need somebody with experience. But you're also worried about budget, so it's kind of like, you got to give and take a little bit here or there and see what's more
It's a
beneficial for
compromise.
you.
Yeah, it's something
Yeah.
that's never like it's never like a job done. It's just ongoing, especially
Yes.
getting more studies, training more staff. I also think the site directors have to get their hands dirty. Like
Hmm.
I'm on I don't want to, but I'm on data entry. I enter data here and there. I'm in Creo doing the e-source when the patients are there.
Hmm.
If I see the coordinator's busy like with the blood draws and processing, the other one's doing like the rating scale, the other one's working on study startup for another study, and the patient's sitting there, I'll go in there, make
Hmm.
sure, hey, what's your medical history? Let's go through this. Let's talk. Do you want a sandwich? Just to like participate. I'm not just
Yeah.
there telling people what to do and that's it.
Hmm.
And that if you don't do that as a site director, you have no way of knowing if your coordinators really are overburdened
Hmm.
or if they're just complaining. I
Yeah.
know. We're at the size where I still know. The challenge is when we have multiple sites going at the same time, I can't be everywhere at once.
Hmm.
But if I travel enough and I empower people to slowly become site directors, I think it can be done, and then my job's to manage the site directors, which we're nowhere near that stage right now in UMA clinical
Yeah.
trials, but I know some sites are.
Hmm.
So you just have to get your hands dirty. That's the only way to actually see if like your coordinators are really overworked or not. And PI owners have a hard time doing this
Hmm.
because PIs usually don't get their hands dirty on the
Hmm.
little stuff. They might see the patient, they might do a physical, they might talk to the patient for 5 minutes, "How are you feeling?" Medical history, but they don't know, like, there's a database lock, and you have 100 queries to answer, and you still have 3 visits that week. PIs don't know that, like, they don't so you do need like an in-between, like a
Hmm.
site director, site manager. Otherwise, I mean, you have no way of knowing, like, the ownership has no way of knowing, like, are they really overworked or are they just complaining?
Yeah. 100%. So yeah, I think
Uh
it's communication and hands-on experience, and then making sure that you come up with some sort of levels or metrics for the site to be able to keep on top of that and like actively grow when it's needed.
There's levels to this, guys.
Hmm.
Ashley, we
Yes.
haven't even gotten into by the way, Ashley's a co-founder of Latinos in Clinical Research. And,
Save our sites.
yeah, we'll get to save our sites, but if
Yes.
Latinos in Clinical Research had a site director, that'd be you. 'Cause you're the
Thank
one
you.
keeping everyone in like, you're the one making sure people are doing what they're supposed to do. It's actually a good parallel to, what I tell my coordinators. I
Hmm.
tell them once we go from me telling you what to do to you telling me what to do, I think you're fully trained at that
Like you're
point. Like
in.
you know what you're doing at this point. Like that's what I want. That's your
Yeah.
role in LICR. Like you've become keeping everyone organized, telling people what to do. It's an interesting parallel there. But save our sites. You mentioned it. Okay.
Hmm.
SaveOurSites.com. I think this has got to be one of the topics that we
Yes.
discussed there.
Yes. No, I agree 100% talking about that. And because I do think some people feel like, oh, we're just going to be bashing CROs or sponsors. It's like, no, because there are good sites and then there's bad sites,
We
right?
haven't
And
bashed one CRO or sponsor on this
uh,
podcast for
I
like
know,
40 minutes. It's
I know.
all internal dialogue among sites.
Internal dialogue, yes. So yeah, I think that it's going to be good, especially if we have PIs that are looking to, because I've heard of this from some people that you have CRAs that are looking to be site directors and that are going to bring potential PIs over so that they could hear what we're going to be covering and see if that is a potential business that they want to do. Um, And I think it's important that we cover these topics, that we get candid about what are real issues that happened, what sites need to do to be accountable, and obviously, of course, bring in the other issue of the off end of the spectrum, which is the CROs and sponsors and how they can be beneficial with us and or with the site, excuse me. Yeah, I think this is a really great opportunity. It's obviously affordable. It's extremely affordable. I mean, we initially at early bird we're at $50 an entry. Now it's 250, and I think that's the cap that we're keeping it at, and all the way until the day February of 2024. This is an opportunity for you to literally pay for 3 or 4 individuals from your site for one ticket that you might have gotten at another conference, right? So your whole team
You
can
can
go
pay
as
no, no, it's 10 people at your site for one
10.
ticket at another conference if
Oh my
we
god!
keep
So
the
yeah,
250. And it's only till December, guys. December
yes.
31st is when we have to give a final count to our venue,
Okay.
the
Okay,
University of
I didn't know
Arizona. But yeah, I don't think we'll raise price, but you're in charge of that too. You and
Dr.
Fox are
Fox.
like the site director, and Monica probably. You,
Yeah.
Monica, and Fox are like the site directors for Save Our Sites.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting the kind of feedback, the sponsorships we're getting, and the things that we're bringing to help sites. Right, this is not just coming to network; it's also resources. Right, there's a reason why all of us have been in the industry for so long. I think total, I think we max around 30 years experience or 40 with everybody included.
No,
I
who
think,
knows?
yeah,
No,
it's a quite
I'm
amount.
at 18 by myself.
Oh no, okay, well then yeah, no, no, no.
Yeah,
But yeah,
no.
so just the amount of experience you're gonna have me, CRA sponsor CRA, then you're gonna have site directors, CRO owners, you're gonna have clinical research pavement network. I mean, you're gonna have all sorts of levels in the industry there just with us on the founding side alone, right? And so we're gonna be there to talk, processes, all those kinds of things, network and get connected.
It's what a site-focused conference should be,
Mhm.
and accessible is the important part. Like, we're the owners, we're all site owners, except Ashley, but
Yes.
we needed one. She might be a future site owner, but we needed an outsider as well from the CRO, and now,
Sponsor soon.
you're able to say that? I didn't wanna say it.
I
Sponsor.
get
CRO and now sponsor side. So, I mean, it's important to have that on our leadership team as well. So it's not all one-sided because you're going to see the other side
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
the coin and accessible. Like we're not. We want to make money. We want to first pay our bills. Like that's the
Yeah.
main goal is to
Bills
pay
first.
for this conference. Like we don't want to lose money on it. And
Yeah.
so far, we're not. I don't think.
Yeah. No.
And if we do have a profit, it's all goes rolled into the next year's conference.
Yes.
So it's like we all have other ways we make income. It's not through the um,
Conference.
Save Our
Yeah.
Sites conference. The organization it's going to turn into eventually. Um,
Ultimately, we're creating a conference that we personally would enjoy. Like I've been to this year, I've been to multiple conferences. So my background, I was at site level, CRO, and soon to be sponsor. And all those different sites, when I was at site level, I went to conferences that were even site focused but in the regional area. And obviously each one has its own benefit, but I think that with everybody's experience and their exposure, the great thing is that we come together and really kind of dish out what's the most optimal, because we don't always, even though we have same viewpoints, we don't always agree, right? And so we're coming together to talk about what would probably be the best and more optimal, just to ensure that when you go, you're enjoying from start to finish. It's worth the travel, it's worth the ticket, and yeah,
Last thing before we wrap up,
yeah.
everybody go connect with Ashley on LinkedIn. Links is underneath the video or in the show notes. Tech adoption. Okay, I used to be very um, skeptical of technology for sites to use
Hmm.
because pre-COVID, COVID like changed it. Pre-COVID, site-focused tech, where when you were able to find one, they were usually sponsor and CRO focused tech, was very expensive and not very good. And
Mhm.
post COVID, I'm still skeptical of most because most are like a money grab. But there are some, like the ones I'm sponsoring here, like promoting, that actually help. And we're starting to see a lot of free.
Yeah.
They actually help sites act bigger than they are,
Mhm.
uh, to compete with AMC's and larger teaching institution. I think that's powerful because tech allows you to leverage economies of scale. So, like Inado, for example,
Mhm.
and I still do. And Chris and I offer a consulting service. It's very hands on. Like we do your budgets for you. We help you with your SOAR, anything you need. We also help you get studies, and we'll
Mhm.
help you get like your first studies in your new therapeutic areas. That's like our specialty. But like in Nada, they don't do any of what I just mentioned. They're for experienced sites, but you can get studies like passively through
Mhm.
someone like this.
Mhm.
Where so in the past you needed like a whole biz dev team to find, like go to conferences and find studies. Now you don't. You can hire someone like me and Chris or get Inata for free,
Mhm.
get the studies coming to you passively. Or something like Viva or Creo, Viva Site Vault, where it's like eSource eReg. So you, if we were talking about site directors, if you're traveling or something or working from home, you don't even need to be on the site to
Mhm.
know if a visit's going down or if your coordinators are working on their study startup stuff that you told them to do,
Mhm.
because you can log into these things and you can see in real time, is it being done or not. You don't need to
Mhm.
email, you don't need to text. I still do, but you can just log in and see. Like right now, my site, they're screening someone. I should be able to log in and create and see, did they do the consent? Did the PI sign it? Did they get the study startup? That's tech. That's because of technology.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on sites' hesitancy to implement tech?
So I will say this because when I was at that hybrid clinic, I was actually there when we did the transition. So we did paper, which was horrid. And even prior to that, I was in home health, which was paper before the transition. And it was also very horrid. horrid. So, whatever level you're at, you know that paper is not very optimal, especially if something happens, if there's a flood or whatever, right? But technology, I love it because for multiple reasons. Efficiency is definitely the main one. I mean, you know me, like I'm very OCD-ish. I like a lot of efficiency and cleanliness and all that stuff. But one thing that I saw, and that goes a perfect thing to what we were just talking about, as overseeing as site director, is that I worked with certain individuals at that hybrid clinic that, were really good at looking very busy, and so without technology and these timestamps, you would not be able to efficiently see that, right? And so once the technology came, and I actually, because of my previous background experience before that, I had a lot of technology exposure. So I actually helped the tech kind of oversee some of the things that we needed specifically for our site. When I saw that we were going to have timestamps, I thought that that was amazing. And so once we had that in place, the medical office director was starting to actually see who was actively doing the work and who wasn't, who was able to
Mm,
organize and be actual
yeah,
focuses for progress improvement and who were not. So when it came to raises and salaries and all those kinds of things, this was obviously if you knew how to implement it accurately in your mid or end of year review, but you could utilize that for your benefit and say, hey, well, I improved this process, I oversaw this. And you know I mean, there's so many things that benefit utilizing tech. Now obviously not all tech is great, so this is why I like what you do with Inato and Creo and all of them, because you, before you even speak about them, you review the systems yourself and ensure that they're actually effective, right?
I
Because
have to be a fan first. Like, there's a
yeah,
few that want to
exactly.
sponsor. I'm like, and it's tempting, but I'm like, I haven't implemented it yet. Let's wait.
Yeah, because that is key. You don't, it's one thing to just be another tech company out there doing the same thing as somebody else. What are you innovating? What are you actually doing to assist the site? Because somebody, when I was at the ACRP conference, I overheard somebody saying, well, there's so many tech vendors, they're all doing the same thing. And I said, no, if you speak with them, some of them have a more viewpoint understanding of this one issue at the site level or the XYZ issue that they're focusing on. Maybe they might have generalized similarities, but there's things that are differentiating them, right? And if you take the time to understand the tech and how you would be implemented at your site, it would be useful. I do find that some of the reasons why some sites don't is for the issue that we just discussed, right? Where it's the PI is kind of overseeing most of it because they're the site owner. And I will say, from 13 years of experience in the clinical industry with all levels of doctors that I've experienced, specialty, non-specialty, and years of veteran experience, doctors really aren't fans of technology as much. At least the ones that I've came to exposure with, they're they're fans if their staff will use it and it's going to make efficiency. But as far as them coming in and actually sitting and learning the entire technology themselves, I
Hmm.
have yet to come across more than maybe 5 or 7 doctors that
Doctors
have.
are, especially the ones that run their own private practice
Yes, they're
and do
busy.
research, not just busy, they're very pragmatic. Like,
Yeah.
they're not actually very good business people for the most part.
Hmm.
I mean, they're successful at running a private practice, but they got that way because they're not spending. And
Hmm.
so anytime you tell them, "Oh, new tech," like Creo, for example, Creo's the one that cost from the ones that sponsor this show. But if you sell them something like this for their practice, they really think, like, scrutinize, well, what's the ROI? And like, I need to see it. And if you can't convince them of it, it's game over. Like, they're not
Hmm.
gonna change. They're very pragmatic people.
Yeah, when I was in that hybrid clinic, I was there for a bit, and it was literally towards the end when I was already about to leave, is when they did the transition. And I remember the conversation being, I don't know how much tech vendors cost now, right? But at that site level for that particular system, it was, I think, 40,000 to onboard the entire system and
Yeah.
yeah,
We
and he
ain't
was,
doing that. We ain't
yeah.
doing none of that.
Yeah, and then, well, I remember the physician was just like, "Well, I'd rather just keep doing paper." But the issue is that we were coming up through all these issues where if we were in a rush, there was illegible. I mean, there were so many things that would happen, right? That this system was going to be able to kind of help avoid, and yeah.
There's
So I
different kind
mean,
of tech. There's techs that
yes,
like play defense, and
yeah,
there's techs that play offense, like
mhm,
Inato's offense. Creo's a little bit of both, but it's really offense. Viva is both, and then Versatile, it's also offense. Like, these are all offense, but there are some things like necessary evil you have to spend money for, right? And it's even harder to convince PIs or physicians of spending on that. But sometimes it's the coordinators too. Like, it's not a money thing. It's like Inato, Versatile, Viva. These things are free, and it's still
yeah.
hard to convince. It's not the PI. You tell
Because
the PI, and
because
they're like,
everybody
"Well, what does
has.
the coordinator want?"
Yeah, because everybody has processes and they don't want to change their processes and all of that. But I mean, what I would say to the coordinator is that, if you know you're going to stick in that job forever, then I suppose fine. But for the most part, most coordinators, they don't want to stick there forever. So it's just, if you're going to be valuable, if you're going to go up to CRO level, if you're going to go to a more advanced site that's going to be able to pay you more and those kinds of things, you need to be equipped with different technologies. You need to have that knowledge. You need to be adaptable.
Or
If
you
you're
will
not
get left
adaptable,
behind. I'm
yes,
telling you,
100%.
Ashley, we'll probably do a part 2 on tech, just me, you,
I'm
and
down.
maybe, like, Monica or some people, like, from SOS.
Yeah.
If you're not I went from very skeptical, like, I'm not changing anything, it works well, to I see how these things can work, like Creo, Versatile, and Nato Viva. They're very low cost or free, and I see how they work. To now, it's like, wait till they start connecting to one another. 'Cause we're still in the early stages where it's
Mhm.
tech is like, this is a silo, this is a silo, this is a silo, I use these things different ways. Wait till they all start communicating together. If
Mhm.
you're a site that has not adopted tech and you try to catch up when these things are all communicating, it's too
That's good.
late. It's too
Yeah.
late. You're gonna be irrelevant. That's
Yeah.
my thoughts.
No, no, I agree. I agree. I think everybody. I mean, I know a lot about tech. I know a lot about this and that, the aspect of tech and biotechnology and stuff like that. But am I somebody that jumps at the opportunity to learn different technologies? Not really, to be quite honest, because I know it takes time and
No one wants another login, another
yeah,
email, like, account.
yeah, and understanding the process. But ultimately, is that if you can understand one thing, is that on a full spectrum, not just site level, CRO, sponsor, pharma, everybody is adapting as much as they possibly can for this next era of technology. You need to get on board. Like that's just what it is, you know? And so, yeah, I agree
Tech
100%.
vendors, you are welcome to come to Save Our Sites conference,
Yes.
especially the ones I'm promoting and Brad's promoting, and Fox. Fox has other ones
Mhm.
that, I'm not promoting, like MedVector.
Mhm.
I'm gonna start implementing, I hope, start implementing MedVector, and if I see, like, positive outcome, then I don't mind promoting it here, and then there's others, but this is
Mhm.
where, like, this conversation will continue later on, but Ashley, thank you so much for coming
For
on.
sure.
Guys, gals, go connect with Ashley. She still does resume reviews too. I don't know how,
Yes, I
but
still
she
do.
does have time for that. I referred you someone the other day. Um,
Really?
so go connect with her. And thank you so much, Ashley, for coming on.
Sure.
Good luck at your senior CRA role. We'll talk more soon.
Sounds good.
Like, subscribe, comment, share, guys. Bye bye.